Welcome to class 2 of dealing with shoulder pain. Today we're going to follow a very similar sequence to the first class. We're just going to up the intensity slightly. So expect to spend about 10 to 15 minutes here of doing exercises to help specifically with shoulder pain. Alright, we're going to start the same way we did in class 1 with some foam rolling. So as we said in the first class, this is just to help with blood flow, to help desensitize the area. We're working along this area underneath the armpits, specifically around the lats, maybe towards the back of the shoulder a little bit. When you find a spot that's a little bit tight, just hold on to that area for a few seconds till it desensitizes, so the pain reduces slightly, and then go back into rolling. We're going to spend just about 5 minutes here of rolling through this area, and then we're going to go into our first sequence of mobility work. As we did in class 1, we are going to go into shoulder flexion. So that's lying on your back, hands straight up overhead. We're going to start with both hands. We're going to gradually take the hands overhead in a Y-shaped position, trying to get your thumbs all the way down to touch the ground. Now you might still be struggling to get through full range of motion here. So once you've gone through the first set of 8 to 10 repetitions, what we're going to do in the second set is try and intensify the exercise slightly by adding a little bit of resistance. So in this case, I'm dealing with my left arm as the affected side. I'm going to add a very light weight. This is 1 kg. You can use half of that, 500 grams. And we're going to slowly take that arm overhead in that same shape and really control the movement on the way down. Don't let the weight, with the assistance of gravity, just pull the arm down. I want you to resist as you take that arm all the way back in the Y-shaped position. You can go through 6 to 8 repetitions here after you've done the movement with both hands. Same as last time, remember the cue points. We're focusing on keeping that lower back nice and flat. We want to avoid any rib flare. So pull that rib cage in and make sure we're getting nice core activation and keeping the lower back flat on the ground. Next mobility movement is a rotational movement. We're going to do this in a quadruped position. So sitting on hands and knees, try get your hips all the way back onto your heels. Then what we're going to do is thread the needle. So I'm going to take my left hand and I'm going to thread in between my right hand and my right knee. And I'm going to rotate through here as far as I can to a pain-free point. A little bit of discomfort's okay. And then from here, I'm going to rotate all the way up. I'm going to follow my hand with my eyes. Same thing here, don't push to any point of pain, but you can work into some discomfort or even very minor pain is okay. We're going to go through 2 to 3 sets here of 8 to 10 repetitions. Third mobility movement, gradually progressing into stability work, is going to be a downward dog. So very similar to the yoga movement, the downward dog. What we're going to do from here is we're going to start on hands and knees. We're going to make sure we've got a nice neutral spine position. We're going to slowly lift the knees up, then try push the ground away from the body as we drive the hips up into the air. Now the cue point here whilst you're moving is trying to focus on pushing the ground away from you. So don't just push the hips up in the air because we're not going to get much rotation from the shoulder blades. We're trying to focus on pushing the ground away and getting those shoulder blades to rotate up and away from the body. Try focus on sitting in what's called external rotation. So as we push up, try rotate so the biceps are facing forward. We want to avoid sitting into internal rotation. We can go through 2 to 3 sets here of the downward dog. Make sure we rest at the bottom position. And we don't have to go through a lot of volume here. We can go through 6 to 8 repetitions. Next up, we're going to go into our activation sequence, focusing here on getting good rotator cuff activation or strengthening those muscles towards the posterior part or towards the back of the shoulder. Similar to video 1, we're going to go through the same movements, but we're going to progress it into either a kneeling position. You can do this in a seated position. So what we're going to do here in a kneeling position or in a seated position, start with the elbows tucked in by the side. From here, what we're going to do is go into what's called external rotation. Simply put, all we're trying to do is create some resistance on the band by pulling the hands away from each other. Keep the tempo quite slow and controlled here and go through between 10 to 12 repetitions. Try to use quite a light resistance band when doing this movement. Now it has to be some form of a resistance band or a cable machine. Using 2 dumbbells here is not really going to work because we need to have some sort of resistance being applied against the rotator cuffs. We have to have force being applied from the opposite direction. When you're holding dumbbells here, we're not getting any force being applied from the right plane of motion. The first movement is going through 10 to 12 repetitions with the arms bent at 90 degrees. The second phase of that movement is to straighten the arms and do the same thing. We're trying to pull the hands away from each other. But whilst you're doing this, really focus on reaching forward, so stretching the arms forward here, going through again 10 to 12 repetitions until you feel a bit of a burn towards the outside of the shoulder and towards the back of the shoulder. Then the third movement is going to be the most challenging one. This is because we're slowly starting to take the arms overhead. So same as the first part of the movement, we're going to go into external rotation, but then from here we're going to drive the arms forward to a 90-degree angle. And whilst we're in this position, we're trying to maintain a 90-degree position. So we want to avoid the arm falling inwards into internal rotation. As much as possible, try to keep that elbow pulled inwards and maintain a neutral position, or trying to create a V type of pattern. With this movement, because it's a bit more challenging, we're going to do half the amount of repetitions. So if we've done 10 to 12 repetitions for movement 1 or 2, here we're going to settle for 5 to 6. If you manage to get through class 2 relatively pain-free, then you can progress to the third class. If you're still struggling with this class, maybe continue for another week or 2. If you're feeling pain whilst doing class 2, then I'd suggest even regress to the first class and start off there before progressing back towards class 2.